Zoom, that's it.
Brilliant.
That's it. You got it.
Perfect. So good morning, everyone. So we might get started. So I'm going to do a quick introduction. So hello, my name is Bridget Quinlan and I am part of the team here at Trained-In. We're absolutely delighted to have been engaged by Taste of Success Skillnet to carry out the Reignite programme. The Reignite programme is putting the spark back into the food, drink and hospitality sector, which we all know has been massively hit by COVID. So it's very important to support the hospitality industry right now. And we hope we're going to get back into business, I suppose, coming into the summer. So just we're on Zoom now, so you can use the chat. And if you want to turn on your cameras, maybe Vince, do you have any preference?
Yeah, do you know, I really enjoy when I can see an audience. I'm going to be quite animated and get people involved and connected. So yeah, if I could see it, it would be brilliant. But I respect that. They can't, not a problem.
Yeah, perfect. So if it would prefer if you did, but there's no issue if you don't want to turn on your camera. So perfect. So we might get into it now. We can use the chat facility. If you have any questions at all, you can pop them in the chat and we'll ask them at the very end. So Vince, if you want to get into it now, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Let me just have a go at, yeah, so okay, right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vince Donovan from a training company based actually in Cardiff in Wales here, and it's delighted to be able to join you on this Easter Friday, and so very grateful that you've taken some time out to look at the training today. Really pleased that I'm delighted with being asked to speak on your behalf. And the subject area that I'd like to cover with yourselves is about managing difficult customers in the hospitality sector. Sadly, the hospitality sector has been massively affected by COVID, but we're going to make some progress and looking at how things, all these little sort of green shoots are going to start to come into, hopefully, the grass is going to be quite long, I think. When we start going into it, I think a lot of people are going to go wild. And are we ready? Are we ready to take on this challenge when our hospitality sector, is given that green light to go ahead? So in terms of introductions, I'll just go into it in terms of who I am. I'm just checking. Can you see my screen okay, ladies and gents? If you just give me a thumbs up for some of you got, yeah, that's great. Okay. So, but in terms of introductions, I had an amazing career. I served 30 years in the police service in South Wales. That was very much my vocation, to help people. And I thought it was amazing. And I worked in social went into day centers and worked with young people. And that was really, really powerful. It was an amazing part of my job. Really enjoyed it. But I guess over the last 20 years, I've had the pleasure of working with loads of different organizations, many of which are in the hospitality sectors, pubs, clubs, hotels, restaurants. But I also work with local authorities and housing associations and lots of charitable organizations as well. And generally in that time, over 20 years and with 30 years police service, my subject is all around managing workplace violence and aggression, managing difficult customers at difficult times. With regard to today's presentation, the areas I'd like to cover with you are these. We're going to look at the hospitality sector and how we manage risk. What are the types of risks pertinent to your industry? We're going to look at those risks in a little bit of detail. We're going to look at why people get angry, why they get upset, what are the possible triggers that initiate a confrontation that our staff can encounter, and then our communication strategies to sort of de-escalate and try and sort of improve that customer experience where we can. So that's an agenda, and we'll revisit this at the end of the presentation. Okay, so if I carry on then now, the hospitality sector in itself. Now, I'm hoping that you're going to really enjoy the type of stuff I've had to learn in these virtual training situations. I'm just going to change the screen slightly, but then bring in some of these amazing sort of what we call backgrounds that you can include within Zoom. So when we look at the hospitality sector in general, it's broken down into 4 key areas. And one of those areas is food and beverage. And some of these, some cafe shops are open, but certainly things have taken a real sort of hit over the last 12 months during COVID. So being in the coffee shop itself, how many of us are actually missing this experience of going up and smelling that coffee and the coffee beans and sitting down and just having a conversation in a comfortable, warm, friendly environment? And sadly, we're missing out there. An experience of going to the restaurant and sitting down with family and friends and enjoying that type of environment. Let's look at another sector that's been massively affected: travel and tourism in general. Goodness me, the last time I was actually on an aircraft, I can't wait to be crammed in those little seats and make my way and just be there, do you know, just to see that again and go to some faraway location and check in the hotel. And the next thing, you know, grabbing your stuff and yeah, I'll be with you now. Hang on, sorry. And we're on the beach. So we've got that in terms of the tourism industry. And then closer to home in terms of our hotels and our bed and breakfasts and things of that nature, and just visiting the amazing tourist locations around our country here at home. And again, spending that great time with family and friends in that hospitality sector. The one other area of the hospitality sector is regarding recreation and sort of bars and clubs we're going to talk about, and some of the risk factors that can present in some areas, but just recreation in general, just being on for some on the golf course, nice shot. If it's not that, how about this one? How many of us miss being on the theme park itself? I love that background situation, but goodness me, now this is probably a bit too loud for me, but to be in this situation, enjoying, you know, that time with friends and just getting out and letting your hair down, yeah, that's awesome. These are the types of things we miss within our sectors. But let's go back into the presentation again. Let me carry on with here. Okay, so we just thought about these various areas, the 4 areas within hospitality. And then on our subject is then how we reflect on the triggers. What types of things lead to conflict, where our customers feel in some way the service they've received requires some form of challenge, and this presents itself to a member of staff. The types of triggers, yeah, that expectations have not been met, and why that is, what's happened. The specific needs may not be met. Okay, there may be disability related issues or whatever. There can be a variety of things that can be potential triggers where customers will challenge a member of staff. The quality of the service, the experience itself, issues regarding payment disputes, noise levels, noise from different groups or different fractions within that same environment, the cleanliness of that environment. All these are potential challenges, waiting times, queue jumping, things like that. Staff, organizations failing to act properly and promptly to meet those particular sort of needs when people are invested in that sort of social recreational time. Okay, and what happens if it goes wrong? Okay, what's the impact? What's the impact not only for the staff, but on the reputation of the organization as well when things go wrong, when customers complain? They hit that little bell. I want to see the manager now. And then the poor old member of staff thinking, oh, all right, what am I going to do? Am I skilled? Am I prepared? What can I say? What can I do to try and alleviate this issue? What if now there's another 3 or 4 people watching? What impact are they having? Is this now souring their feelings towards working and sort of enjoying that sort of situation? Yeah, when things get difficult and staff have to deal with customer complaints. Okay, it's inevitable, it happens. We're never going to please all the people all of the time. These things happen. Yeah, more people joining us, that's great. Great to see others joining too. Okay, so what do we do? What are our responsibilities? What's the organization's responsibilities? Now, it was interesting for me. A lot of my training has been in England, Wales, and Scotland, and goodness me, the thought of actually speaking to representatives and delegates here in Ireland is fabulous for me. It's really amazing. So I've looked at the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act 2005, which is legislation pertinent to Ireland itself. And in essence, it's exactly the same as the Health and Safety at Work Act in the UK. But with regard to the organisational responsibilities, they are to assess risks. What are the hazards? What are the hazards within the workplace? Assessing those risks and putting those control measures in place where those risks have been identified. So think about the risks within your environments if this is particular to you. Have they been identified? Have we made an accurate assessment? The transition from COVID back into the workplace. And I can only anticipate, as I mentioned earlier, that suddenly people are just going to really seek you guys out and seeking that entertainment that they've massively missed for such a significant length of time. So what do our organizational practices and policies say? Have we defined work-related violence and aggression and clarified the organization's position that what is unacceptable behavior? Do we have that definition? Is that laid out in our organization's policy? In addition to that, the responsibilities of employers, managers and employees with regard to the safety management system in place. Is that endorsed? Is that widely known? Are people tested on that for when we return to work? If we look at other things as well, direction with regard to training, what training have staff had with regard to managing difficult customers? How do they cope? The responses to an incident occurring, the reporting procedures, and the arrangements subsequently for employee support. Now, under the legislation respective to whatever part of the country we are in, it's all pretty much the same. We have a duty of care to our colleagues, to our staff, to ensure their health, safety, and their welfare. Let's move on. When we look at training, our staff trained in recognizing the early signs of aggression. We're going to look at some of those issues shortly. Recognizing the early signs of aggression, because that's the best time to try and nip things in the bud where we possibly can. When somebody starts shouting and swearing and animating all that, it's very, very difficult at that time. Okay, so the early signs are our clear opportunity to try and de-escalate. How to manage difficult situations with customers and strategies to avoid aggression. What can we say? What can we do? Who's the best person? Where does this conversation take place? Do I take this person to the side? Do I invite them into the office? We've got COVID as well to consider about all these different factors as well. All part of our risk management processes here. What are de-escalation techniques? Again, we'll cover some of these shortly. And our dynamic assessments, how to assess risks and respond where circumstances change. Who's walking the floor? Who's watching and assessing those people enjoying that recreational activity? You may find that that particular group, no problems whatsoever, all those, but we've got something bubbling up over here. So what do I do about this group over here? And is it just by going over and saying, is everything okay? Can I get anybody anything or whatever? Just some form of visible early intervention can really, really help. We'll carry on. Other types of training considerations to consider. Information on policies and procedures. Are they in place to manage the risk of aggression and behavior? Information, policies and procedures. What are the expectations of staff when managing difficult customers? What can they say? What can they do? Is it money off? What can we do in that situation? Can we discounts, vouchers? What's the expectations? What's endorsed? What are security measures and devices as alarms when things get badly wrong? And do we test them? Are staff familiar with them? And do they know what action others will take, what they should take? And how does a member of staff report an incident? And what post-incident procedures are in place for them? And they're givens. They have to be in place for any organization employing 5 or more staff. And that includes workers who are working various times in the day, part-time workers, voluntary workers. We're employing more than 5 members of staff. We have to have all these policies and procedures in place. Okay. So I'm going to rephrase now in terms of the legislation, which is pretty much the same. It's just a change in words, but the Health and Safety at Work Act, and with particular regard to workplace violence, says that as staff, if we encounter any incident which we're either abused, threatened, or assaulted in circumstances related to our work, well, we should report it. So do our staff, are they trained in what abuse is? So I've got both logos there, the HSE, Health and Safety Executive, Health and Safety Authority in Ireland. So the definitions are exactly the same. Where a member of staff, when simply doing their job, is abused, verbally insulted, if it's offensive, it's embarrassing, and it's personally focused upon the member of staff, not the organization, not the situation, and particularly if it's with regard to any of the protective characteristics, if it's sexist, if it's racist, if it's homophobic, if it's because of the age of somebody or the physical size of that person. We're talking about abuse. And do our staff know that they've got a responsibility to report abuse? Not only abuse, let's go back to that definition. If they're threatened, if the member of staff feels threatened in that situation, to be abused or threatened when simply doing a job can have a massive impact on that person's confidence. Yeah, they might pack the job in. We might lose that member of staff. We've got to provide those support systems for them where we can. To be threatened is an awful thing. When a member of staff thinks, goodness me, I've got to look over my shoulder because I don't want to see this person. I don't want that person to see me get into my car just in case they follow me or they find out where I live. Okay, so what's it like to be threatened? Staff need to report that. We need to identify that and act accordingly. Being assaulted, physically assaulted, grabbed, pushed, poked. When we talk about assaults, let me just go into the main camera. But when we talk about assaults, if somebody comes up to you and they start pointing at you, excuse me, because this can come across quite impacted, they now start poking you in the shoulder or they push you backwards. Well, in legislation, in health and safety legislation, that's an assault. It's unacceptable. It's no person's got the right to lay hands in anger and aggression on another person. Staff got to realize that that person's crossed the line. They need to incident report that in compliance with organizational policies. But not only an assault out of anger or aggression, that assault could actually be, that assault could even also be with regard to a sexual assault. And when we talk about a sexual assault, it's anything that the victim perceives to be of a sexual nature. If it was a grab, a grope, it's whatever the victim perceives. So the matter would need to be investigated and acted on accordingly. So these are, what I tried to focus on initially is our organizational policies in adherence to legislation. We got to identify what those risks are within our workplace, things that can reasonably occur within our working environments, see who may be affected, look at staff training issues, look at the types of things that should be reported that should then be investigated. So how do staff actually report them? Are they aware that there is an incident report facility? This incident report may well cover, it'll double up for accidents and near misses. And what I'd like to see with organizations is they've got a clear reference to violence and aggression in the workplace, in addition to all the other factors. So staff should be encouraged to report incidents when things go wrong, so we can learn from them and react accordingly. Other things too, that investigation process, the member of staff is asked to give their account, to explain what happened, and post-incident in terms of be offered the appropriate support for them, whether that be indeed time off or counselling or training or whatever it might be to support that individual. Yeah, I focused originally at the start of this presentation on the organisation responsibilities, recognising the hospitality sector where people are letting their hair down, they're out to enjoy themselves. Sometimes people can go a little bit far and that can have an impact on staff. It's how we work together to protect our staff and act in accordance with the legislation and improve our customer experiences where we can. I'm now going to go into another area now in terms of anger and aggression and the need, I guess, to intervene early, as was mentioned earlier. And when we talk about anger and aggression, well, pretty much we're looking at body language and how people react when they're upset. And some of the things I want to focus on is we've pretty much got two mind states. We got our thoughts and our feelings. And when things are going pretty well, we're reasonably balanced or level-headed, if you like. But it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much for somebody's emotions to start increasing when things go badly, that their expectations are not met. And if that's allowed to continue, well, then those emotions could lead then to frustration. and that could then escalate to anger and aggression. And in extreme situations, that could escalate to a physical level. So our aim is to keep it at this level, that everybody, when they're enjoying and the experience of engaging in the hospitality industry, are in this state. But that's not going to always be the case. So there will be occasions, obviously, when people are cheesed off, their expectations are not being met. There's frustrations there. Now, in this particular image now, you can see something's happened, and now you've got a little bit of an increase in adrenaline. Adrenaline is starting to go up a little bit here, the adrenaline levels, and those trigger events. It doesn't take much for somebody to say the wrong thing that can escalate that situation further. It could be that another family member or another person in that group says, oh, you want to make a complaint, I'll tell you, I wouldn't put up with that. And then that person gets driven on by a greater emotional response. So it doesn't take much. And our idea, our aim is to tackle this as soon as we possibly can. Okay, if we let it go, unfortunately, it can increase. It could increase now, and now the person gets angry. And depending on how they manage their anger, that could present itself as they get aggressive. And the member of staff who now has to manage this situation is going to encounter extreme difficulties. This, to me, is the domain where a member of staff is more likely to face or experience abuse or threats. Okay, so the language, shouting, raised voices, pointing, we're going to see all these types of things. I've got some images for you. What we've got to avoid that. What we've definitely got to avoid is a situation where that now gets physically dangerous, when that member of staff, because assaults do actually occur. Certainly, I've got statistics to look at all incidents of violence and aggression in England and Wales, and those figures are really, really high. About 3,000 people every day suffer any form of workplace violence or aggression, either threats or physical assaults. Okay, so this happens, unfortunately. It does and can escalate to this level. Okay, so let's break these three things down. Early warning danger, but it doesn't stop at the top there. Okay. What you'll find is when somebody gets angry and emotional, as you can see, the emotions start to increase. And our aim is to bring it down where we certainly can. The higher they go up, the longer it takes for them to come back down. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much as they're coming back down for somebody to say the wrong thing and bang, up they go again. I just think back in my police career when there's been an argument, a domestic dispute in a pub or a club, and family members have intervened and they go their separate ways, and all of a sudden somebody says something and bang, up it goes. And then, yeah, back on the phone, police required then furthermore. Okay, so we got that. And then you get to the post-incident. So time heals. This is trying to demonstrate that time heals, but it does take time. It could take 20 minutes, an hour, it could take even longer. But on that downward slope, there is that possibility of it re-escalating because the adrenaline is still high. That dotted blue line is still adrenaline. There's so much adrenaline, the higher they go. So the idea being is to engage early in the early warning phase. So what types of signs, what are we looking for? When we look at early warning behaviors in terms of body language, well, we learn body language pretty much from birth. So crying, to have little temper tantrums, to laugh, to smile, all those type of things pretty much happen, goodness me, within sort of days when we open our eyes and start moving, and pretty much from birth state. And things and behaviors don't actually change a great deal. So if we move on a couple of years from birth into this early warning phase, when people start getting a little bit emotional, what does it look like from a child perspective to an older person? Well, there you go, your little girl there. Look at the frown on this little girl. She's got her arms crossed, she's cheesed off. All right. Bit of defiance there, the way she stood. This person is not happy, but she's only 3. She's with mum and dad. How does a member of staff deal with this individual? This individual is more likely to access their services. It's going to be the one who has a complaint. And we've got the same tendencies. I'll go back to this child. We've got exactly the same features: eye contact, cross arms, stance. And we get this and we recognize this. And nothing really changes. So our staff need to be aware of reading body language, recognizing the signs, hearing the mumbles, hearing the huffs, the puffs, the sighs, the tuts, the tapping, the person looking at their watch. These are triggers that a member of staff has got to be astute to, and through good communication, identifying these and say, oh, excuse me, sir, is everything okay? Can I, yeah, okay, 5 more minutes, I'm just checking with, okay, so it's about engaging with people at this early time, because this person, though upset, is highly unlikely to shout and wave their arms about and swear and things like and cause a scene. They've got an issue, they're upset, and they want a response. This is a time we target where we best can. Let's move on. The warning phase. Well, unfortunately, things have escalated now. If we haven't nipped things in the bud, or it's just such an emotional event that's occurred, which has led to aggression now, the person's emotional levels have gone really, really high. Adrenaline is high. Yeah, the mind is really increasing now, big time. Not thinking straight, really emotional. And what are the signs here? What's it like for a member of staff now to deal and intervene at this level? Look at the difference. Instead of this close response earlier, of close and defiance and levels low, huffing, puffing, tutting, tapping, animation low, as if we're looking at an old transistor radio and turning the radio down. And now in the warning signs, now we're turning that volume up. We've got the situation now, the person is pointed, eye contact, staring, invading space. Let's look at some more. Shouting, angry, eye contact again, loud, animated, people are looking, impact on others, significant. Again, threatening, pointed, eye contact, all these signs. How does a member of staff cope in this situation? What's the expectations? Is it for that member of staff to deal? Who is the best member of staff to deal? Is it that person who was first in contact, or is it a line manager who now intervenes? Is it, and can it be sometimes a gender issue? Interesting argument. I haven't got time to discuss it. Always evokes a lot of interest during training. But is it sometimes better for a female member of staff to deal with this angry individual that rather than a male member of staff? He may, in inverted commas, see a male member of staff as being a threat to his ego. And that could then escalate things more considerably. It may be better, I don't know, it depends on the situation, depends on his background and situation, but sometimes it may be better for a female member of staff to deal with this person. That we take this person away from the crowd situation because he's playing up. I always look at this as the member of staff is one actor, the aggressive person is another actor, and those people all around are the audience. And as that continues in front of the audience, he's going to continue to act. So think about the parts, the players in this situation and how we respond to that level of risk. Again, all we're looking at is a behavior that emphasizes aggression here, irrespective of age groups. Okay, the next area we're going to look at now the danger phase. When things really go wrong, and sadly this does occur in some industries, in your industry too, the danger phase. When that person now, the adrenaline levels have been allowed, they haven't been stopped, and they're still rising, and they get to that danger phase. And now, in terms of the emotional response, well, that's going up even more. The person isn't thinking at all. And a threat that you're going to ring the police, get them, I'll fight them all. They don't care in that state. That's the difference. The person is so emotional, they're not thinking of consequences. Their actions are going to be acting on impulse, animal instinct. Okay, what are those signs? What are we looking at now? Significant frustrations. How does a member of staff deal with these types of situations? Are they safe to do so? Is it one member of staff? Is it two members of staff? What does that look like if two members of staff approach? Could that make the situation worse? Could do. Okay, so how do we deal with a significant threat in that situation? Okay, What I've looked at there is how we identify body language, the various levels, that staff have an awareness of at what time they need to intervene, because they're going to be far more successful intervening at that early phase. So in terms of staff expectations, going back to all three, what is the policy? What are the expectations of the organization? Well, to deal with things at the early possible time, because that's when it's safest for staff and it's safer for the reputation and for the impact on others. And sometimes it depends on the situation, but in difficult situations, when we talk about our night economies and the possibility of alcohol in certain situations, that sometimes a member of staff might be able to de-escalate it in the warning state if they use certain tactics and skills and strategies to again bring it down and hopefully keep an eye and monitor on situations. It might be that they've got some success there, but they need to have that understanding and those skills to do so. That needs to be within the organization policies and procedures. So, okay, what we've just looked at then is aggression, the aggression cycle, how an individual can go from from being in enjoyment mode and friendship mode and everything's cool and everything's good, but then a trigger occurs, something happens which leads now to an escalation. You've got to deal with it then. If we don't, it can escalate further. And then it escalates again. So recognizing when to intervene. So let's look at some of the approaches that staff can use and possibly use to their favor. Okay, so managing difficult customers. What can we do? It's all down to the behavior of the member of staff, how they react, what they say. And there's sometimes we unwittingly, which is a lovely word I use here in training, unwittingly we do things just out of sheer habit, just because we get emotional, because we are ourselves going through our own fight or flight situations, because when that angry customer starts saying you and this and you, and it's personalized, well, that's going to have an impact on staff. They're going to feel uncomfortable. They're going to feel emotional themselves. They can feel scared. They can feel angry. These are natural human emotions. So what does staff do? Well, sometimes they do it really, really well, but sometimes they don't do so well. And sometimes they give the wrong messaging, which can actually be triggers. They don't help the situation. And what we're going to look at to start with, excuse me, sorry, excuse me, we're going to look at possible triggers, negative body language. What do they do wrong? Okay, so let's start with that. Well, what if that member of staff tries to overtalk, to butt in, to chip in, to contest, to mirror the anger of the customer? As the customer starts raising a voice, the member of staff starts raising their voice. Not good. This is a massive trigger. This will trigger the next level. We'll talk about our communication strategies later, but certainly mirroring anger, mirroring aggression is not going to help. But we're only human. When we take so much, it's going to have an impact on us. And sometimes a member of staff is only natural. They might say, well, hang on a sec, don't speak to me like that. And what I'm doing now, I'm now pointing because I'm now feeling personally attacked. Okay, so the member of staff raise their voice. This is not going to help. The member of staff, as I've just demonstrated there, starts pointing at the person. This is a massive trigger. This is not going to help. If I pointed at you, it's uncomfortable because it's personal. We don't like that. That's offensive. We do that when we get upset. Other things we do. When we explain to somebody and we then think that we get exasperated and we don't think the person is listening to what we have tried to do. And the member of staff just starts spraying the fingers open like that, in itself can be a trigger because they're emphasizing their own emotional anxiety starting to build. If it's not that, another sign that we sometimes see is a member of staff might start chopping the hands. If we chop the hands, that could start to create an emotional response from the customer's perspective. One hand or sometimes two, chopping the hands with two hands. I'm overemphasizing, I'm showing as a member of staff that I am getting emotional. This is not going to help. Let's look at some more. I now decide to walk away. That in certain circumstances, yes, when we talk about what those situations are, we talk about removing yourself, absolutely. But how do you do it in such a way that we're not aggravating or making the situation worse? Because if I use another camera now, if I go into this camera now, and if I'm looking at you and I'm talking to you and I think, goodness, and I've tried to explain, right, I'm sorry, sir, right, yeah, please don't speak to me like that. I am trying to help, yes. Look, you're affecting other people who are here and there's children over there. So if I can just remind you of that, right, okay. I then turn my back on you and walk away, I'm taking a risk. It could well be that person says, don't you turn your back on me. And with that, grabbed and pulled around to re-confront that individual. Okay, so what do you do? What does a member of staff do when they feel they've got to remove themselves from a situation? Simply this, as they continue to describe or explain, right, you are set, right, okay, I'm just going to get my line manager for me now, just going to give them a minute, it'll be 2 minutes, okay, right. And what you can see on this occasion, I've stepped back. I'm continuing to engage. I know now that the person actually isn't tracking me and following me and right behind me or in front of me. I've now got space and now I can turn my back safely in that situation. So think about the impact on the member staff as to when they stay there and when they decide to remove themselves in different situations. With anger and aggression, when a customer is being very difficult, their needs have not been met in some way. And when speaking to a member staff, human nature says this, that we can't help it. We just end up staring. We don't know what to say sometimes because we're in this sort of fight, flight, or shock mode. We stare back at the person. As you can see here, the thing is, if I stare at you, that's a trigger. That's not going to help. It's a trigger. And when somebody who's agitated and upset starts getting, and certainly if we start rolling our eyes, but when that person is agitated and the member staff is staring at them because we can't help it, we're in that trance, we're in that zone, that in itself can be a trigger matter. I tell staff on training, when dealing with unexpected situations, when encountering anger and aggression, engage that person, try to do so. We'll talk about other things now, but make sure that in eye contact, you blink. Make sure that you blink. And many times during virtual training, I suddenly find that when I'm looking around the audience, I find that people are actually blinking. You know to blink, you've done it before. But what I'm saying is just break that eye contact. So with your explanations, you're right, okay, sir. So you're deliberately blinking rather than focusing and staring back. This can be misinterpreted. Rolling your eyes is going to be a massive trigger. If you do that, oh, here we go, oh, right, or patronizing with our tones and expressions as well. But then something else I see, which I'm very keen to sort of to raise and highlight here regarding this type of input. When we're dealing with angry people, and if we look at this lady here, and I've got the cursor on the lady who's pointing, and if we consider this a member of staff, and unfortunately, time and time again, when people are aggressive, I see this. I see the member of staff invading space. They close a person down. That's not helping. If we invade somebody's space, we go back out again. We are now forcing that individual into their own fight or flight response. That could escalate for things further. They could back away. They may not. We haven't helped the situation. And what does that look like? What does that look like with regard to other guests, other people at different tables, other people enjoying themselves with their family members when they see a member of staff closing down somebody? Doesn't help. That's not conflict management. And sometimes different images here, but in this situation, we've got the member of staff here in sort of like the pinky color. I'm speaking to in this situation, I train staff in health environments. So we've got the member staff and you've got the patient. And what's going wrong here? Okay, let's zoom in on a few things. Eye contact, staring, space, hands. Remember I said about hands, we give a lot of information regarding our hands. Stance, squared on. And if I zoom back out again, where's the conversation taking place? She's backed this person into a corner or back against the wall. This is a trigger. That doesn't help. Then we look at our attitude, our behavior. The manager arrives then to deal with the situation. What impressions the manager giving when they got their hands in their pockets? Image has a lot to play in triggering events. Hands in pockets. Potentially looking down at somebody. I'm very conscious with hospitality, there are so many different aspects, as I highlighted in the earlier slides, but the point I'm trying to clarify here is about space and distance and height disparities as well. If I just simply cross my arms and look down at you, if I look down on somebody, straight away that gives a bad attitude, big time. And it might be that I actually, if I just sort of look at that person, come down to their level, certainly if they're sat down, that would be far more engaging. That's going to help. But if we look down at people, that's a trigger. When I started, when I went into this camera, I crossed my arms. If you remember the images I showed you in early warning, where you start off with that little girl, and then the age groups went up, every one of them had their arms crossed. If I'm the member of staff and I've got my arms crossed when dealing with a customer complaint, I'm going to make this situation worse without even saying a word. And I've heard this so many times. There could be the customer says, look at you, look at the attitude on you. Look at the attitude on. The member of staff hasn't said a word. Their body language has already done enough. It's created triggers. And you can see from various angles and other people's perceptions of what a member of staff, when crossing their arms in with a customer complaint, can look like. Not only crossing our arms, but also about putting our arms behind our back. Coming across quite authoritarian doesn't help. And you can see through these examples. And certainly, when the member of staff then places their hands on their hips, I place my hands on my hips now, I look quite intimidating. I've actually made myself look bigger, defensive, judging you, patronizing you. Now, in some way, sort of challenging you now, looking more authoritarian, looking a little bit more aggressive in stance, just by placing your hands on your hips. Don't forget, it doesn't take much. Because as I demonstrated earlier, when people are upset, their emotions are going up. As their emotions going up, whatever little sort of trait that we're doing, they're looking at that and they're so sensitive. It's like maximizing it 10 times. You crossing your arms, you got real big attitude. You put your hands on your hips, you look aggressive because they're just so sensitive. Because as they get more and more emotional, as the adrenaline increases, that sensitivity increases in terms of what they see and what they hear. What they hear is our words. We'll look at words shortly. We look at our watch during a complaint. What have you just told that person? You've had a gut syndrome. You've got something else to get on with. You're not listening to that person just because we've looked at our watch. And what I've tried to describe here is certain types of traits that can be those trigger events. As we looked at adrenaline on that sort of graph earlier, we talked about triggers. The member of staff who's trying to deal with early warning has to be aware that their body language can trigger situations. They were the negative. So what do we learn from that? What can we do instead? What should we do? So our customer services response. Don't forget, we're looking at the early warning intervention levels now. Your facial expressions. Okay, we're polite, we're professional. Good eye contact, blinking, expressing an interest. And relax, getting those shoulders down, not crossing our arms, not being defensive, not putting our hand, not overemphasizing something, not raising our voice, but being relaxed, engaging and listening. And if necessary, taking that person aside where we can. And nodding to some degree, show some form of empathy, nod. Show active listening in that respect. Show some form of agreement with their dispute, that you recognize it and you're prepared to work with them. And lean forward. If you've invited that person to sit down and then you sit down, lean forward to show interest. Always think about distances and things like that with spatial distance now during COVID, but this is upon a trying to get in normal times, we've got to look positively about leaning forward and showing interest where we can. And these subtle things like just literally tilting your head, just tilt the head slightly. You ask a question and just slowly tilt your head. If it's not that, it might be that you steeple the hands. I've asked the question, I steeple the hands in this situation. You can see a little bit better in this image here to better engage. I'm now going to listen to you. Part of conflict management and managing difficult customers is to listen to what the complaint is. Don't interrupt them, just listen and show these different traits. Is going to bring it down at this earliest possible time. Inviting someone to sit down. It's a good idea. Inviting this person to have a chat with you over here is a good suggestion in these type of situations. And rather than space, it's now that we recognize what that space should be. And if I take myself out of the camera now, is we've got to really move back. And in this situation, what you can see is this lady here has now dropped a back foot. Let me just try and describe that. Space is really important. If I place myself in line with a camera now, with the side of the whiteboard, just come forward. Yeah, that's okay. Whiteboard. If the person is too close to me, if I just simply drop my back foot, you can see how much space I gain, and my body language is open. I'm trying to engage. I'm listening to that person. Okay, but just by dropping your back foot gives an incredible additional amount of space. I try to demonstrate that regarding this slide here. Space, eye contact, all these different skills. And sometimes it may be that as a result of the situation, things may have escalated a little bit further. But two members of staff may feel that it's appropriate for the two members of staff to intervene. But then I see this so often, and staff, unfortunately, they get this wrong. This is not a good idea. What I'd like you to think of, if you could for this couple of minutes, if you could place yourself in the shoes of this lady here in green. If you were this person and being spoken to by a manager and a member of staff around a complaint that you had, how would you feel if two persons were stood shoulder to shoulder, both looking at you? Trigger. You feel intimidated, you're going to become defensive. And for some people, becoming defensive can be that they get angry and get aggressive. Two people standing next to each other is not going to help the situation. When we look at slightly different, I want you to imagine that you're this lady or this person in green. How would you feel if two members of staff, the member of staff, the manager, now they start speaking to you in this situation? They're still in front of you. They're slightly separated, but they're both in line and they're both looking at you. Trigger. Again, it's not going to be helpful. It's going to make this person feel uncomfortable, feel intimidated. Depending on their personality, they get angry, they get more agitated. Look at you, I'm not having it, because they're confused. They're looking at two people. Confusion is setting in. Feeling targeted sets in. And what we need to do and do things differently. So in training, we go into far more detail where we say, right, just allow one member of staff. One member of staff, it may be the initial member of staff with the manager nearby who's now aware of the situation, and allowing that person, whoever they might be, to engage on their own with that person. The second member of staff, it could be a colleague, but it may not be a manager. The second member of staff sees what's happening and just every now and again just looks over as the conversation's taking place. So it's all being done in their presence and hearing, and they then might decide or determine whether it's best to stay out of the way, or if things escalate or they think they can help in some way, to make themselves known and move towards. They've now moved towards in this situation. They could have stayed out of it. Things may have escalated. So in this situation, the second member of staff is stood slightly behind their colleague. because their colleague has got that remit to engage and communicate. The second member of staff stands behind. The point I'd look at in terms of how we manage difficult customers is there is still a 2-to-1 ratio, which can create a problem. So I always encourage the second member of staff in this situation, when that customer then starts getting agitated and they look at the second member of staff, just drop your head, just drop your eye shot, and then look up then. But what we're doing, as soon as we drop our gaze, that agitated individual realizes that you're not going to come in, you've got nothing to say, you're not going to add anything in this situation because you're not looking at me, there's no eye contact, no engagement. So they continue speaking to the first person only. Okay, so we've got that sort of technique. I'm going to lastly finish with regard to the types of things during training we say are good to consider in terms of what we actually say. If we recap so far, we've talked about aggression, the various levels, early warning and danger. We talked about members of staff identifying those levels and the focus being that we intervene at the earliest stages where we can. That we're consciously not aware of things that are going to create and aggravate the situation, but we're going to be more open and think about our contact and communication and engagement skills and diversionary tactics. Lastly, with regard to what we say, okay, so these are things during training we look at. Why that person is upset, we don't know. We've got to listen to the narrative, find out what's wrong. We don't know what's happened. So the member of staff needs to establish the issue. So we listen. And we do so with space in mind. Certainly at the moment, but some space in mind. Not getting up too close, not leaning down. That doesn't help. Leaning over with our back to other people in that person's party, their friendship groups, with our back to others. And this is why it's always a good idea to take that person to the side if we possibly can. And that we relax, we get these shoulders down, we don't take it personally, we don't get our arms crossed and things like that. So we're relaxed in our response and we're patient and we listen. When somebody gets angry or upset about a complaint, they're going to repeat themselves. That's going to be a big issue because they're emotional. They're going to say it probably once and twice and sometimes even 3 times. Just be patient, just listen, just nod. If you can, a great tip is to establish their name. Tell them your name. Hello, sorry, my name is Vince and I'm the customer service manager. Sorry, I haven't met. Sorry, sir, what's your name? Sorry, madam, what's your name? Okay, Mrs. James. Okay, Mrs. James. So, Mrs. James, can you just tell me what, if we can use their names, we're now bringing in some form of professional structure. We're trying to build rapport. We're showing them respect. Names really, really help. Identify yourself and ask them to identify themselves, and that's how they feel comfortable speaking to them. Right, oh, Steve. Okay, Steve, so Steve, I can see you're here with other friends. Who are they, Steve? Oh, it's your family, Steve. Okay, so we're trying to build some form of rapport where we possibly can. Other things. Try not to mirror their volumes. Bring our volume less than theirs, and hopefully they'll bring it down to meet ours, not for us to take it up and meet theirs. Think about our volumes there. And be active in helping. There are going to be, in line with our organization policies and procedures, what can I do? Is it within my gift to move this table from here to there? If we're looking at a restaurant situation, if we're looking at a pub situation where we're at a table, whatever is within our environment, be active in helping. What are staff trained in knowing what they can do in difficult circumstances? What are our solutions? All staff should be aware of the solutions. Be active in helping. Respond selectively. It might be there are things that you can't answer. Oh, I'll tell you what, and last time a member of staff said this and nothing was done. You can't answer for the past. All we can do is respond selectively to what's happening in the here and now. So again, just staying focused on the solution to the situation. Provide careful explanations and instructions. Don't overcomplicate things. People are emotional. They're not listening to a great degree. So be very precise and clear cut. Give people options. I can arrange for you to be moved in 5 minutes, or there's another table over there that's available in half an hour. What would you prefer? Giving people options is a great strategy as well. And timely distractions. Again, in communication, when we deal with problems, as there sometimes comes a time where we can then go off problem onto onto why you're here, why have you come here, a friendly, a positive note if we possibly can. So rather than problem, conversation, problem, emotions coming down, go then on to a positive area. Back to problem, bring in another positive area. It's another way we can build in positive rapport with somebody. Really helps. And then our actions are in line with our organizational procedures, because staff are trained and they know what they can do in certain situations. Okay, well, that brings me to the end of this presentation. A presentation where we looked at the hospitality sector. Did you like my my little bit of dancing earlier and that sort of thing? A hospitality sector and how we manage risk management. And this starts with our organizational practices, our policies and procedures, about identifying risks and staff training issues. We talk about the anger and aggression cycle and what that looks like in terms of body language and our communication strategies. A whirlwind trip regarding managing difficult behavior. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vince. That was so informative, and I loved your presentation and with all the different slides, and I thought it was a really engaging way of training, and we're very thankful for it. So if anyone has any questions, they can pop them in the chat now. But Vince, would you have any tips on dealing with difficult customers over the phone, perhaps?
Yeah,
delivery.
Yeah, that's a great one there, over the phone. You know, I really found this virtual way of training is brilliant, because we actually deliver courses where we role play phones. So I'll then take the person's role of how you deal with a difficult customer. I've got various audio tapes. But for me, it's important that we have an organizational process to managing difficult customers. And for many, it's a case of when things get really difficult, let's look at the worst first. If things get really difficult, is it within the member of staff's gift to bring that call to an end? Can they terminate the call? Member of staff is saying, oh God, I'll get in trouble if I do it. So what we do, if we can write down a statement of intent, sir, madam, if you continue to speak to me in this manner, I'll have no hesitation but to terminate the call. And I encourage organizations to endorse that policy statement. And if you're the member of staff who deals with the telephone calls coming into your business, that script should be on your desk. So when you get emotional and you think, oh, what if I get my words wrong? If I can just simply read that out, sir, madam, if you continue, it's a lovely way to protect staff. Yeah. So staff should be aware of when those situations arise, when that person starts getting personal, insulting, shouting, swearing, threatening towards a member of staff, in line with the Health and Safety at Work Act and how we manage violence and aggression, then they know they can escalate to that. But again, those same listening, don't interrupt those people, all those types of things come out in that level of training, specifically regarding phone calls. Thanks for that, Bridget. Any other questions?
Joanne said, fantastic hour, lots to consider when updating our policies and procedures. Thank you, Vince.
Thank you. Oh, it's a real pleasure. Thank you. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Thank you so much. And another question is, if you're dealing with someone who's consumed alcohol, is there a different kind of way to deal with customers in that respect then? So say if you're dealing with someone who might have been in the pub, might have had a couple of drinks, do you have to kind of change the way you're dealing with conflict then?
Yeah, there is. And obviously there's that onus on licensees in terms of who's actually purchasing the drinks. Are our staff familiar in terms of the potential alcohol levels of those in our environment? So again, it's that staff training in terms of that. It may come a time where we reject the sale of alcohol because somebody is identified as being drunk. If somebody is drunk, they're more likely to get they're going to be more likely to go into the warning or danger area. So on training, we specifically look at drunkenness, but not only drunkenness in our hospitality sectors, it could be drug use as well. Okay. And with regard to stimulants, and in training, we talk about the possible signs of drug misuse, and we're looking at different behaviors, body language behaviors. For example, the eyes, the pupil size. If somebody's taken a stimulant, the pupil is likely to be very enlarged. If people are just drunk, their pupil size is likely to be small, because drunkenness, alcohol is a depressant. Imagine a depressant is made smaller. Certain drugs are stimulants, so they're going to make the eye pupil larger. And all this comes out in terms of behaviors to deal with drink and drug-related issues and the effects on individuals and their behaviors. Certainly, thanks for that one.
Brilliant. And thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, they can pop them in the chat. But Vince, do you have any tips you really want to take away from today that you really think could help us, that we could implement straight away from today's session?
Yeah, I think we can start with, and over the weekend when we return back to that workplace, because I just worry that things are going to be intense. I really do. When suddenly the general public is given the go-ahead and they want to access the hospitality sector, they've got to be managed. And it starts firstly with our policies and procedures. Please revisit our policy procedures, review them, update them when necessary. Look at advice from health and safety in the authorities within your areas. Staff awareness, staff training, staff expectations, knowing what to do. That there is support and there's an encouragement. There's a culture to report situations, not to suppress it, not to say, oh, it's part of the job, that we actively support. We debrief staff at the end of the day or when an incident occurs. We take staff aside. We have a look at the impact on other staff. What can we all learn from that situation? How can we help the person directly affected? But ladies and gents, it does start with we've got to get our structures right, get right from the ground upwards. Our policies, procedures, our organizational practices, our training and understanding and adherence to them, and then our soft skills when managing difficult situations. It would be with that, actually, Bridget. That's where I'm starting.
Brilliant. Perfect. Thank you so much, Vince. And if anyone would like any further training with Vince, they can get in contact with us here at Trainedin at sorka@trainedin.ie. You can get in contact with us if you'd like any further training. But Vince, thank you so much for coming on. It was so informative. I'm sure everyone on the call learned so much. And I hope everyone has a lovely Easter.
Thank you,
Perfect.
everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, all. Bridget, I'll stay behind to debrief with yourselves if that's
Perfect.
okay.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Let's stop the recording there, Vince, maybe.
Oh, sure. Let me go into the recording, stop share, and stop. Do you want to stop the cloud recording?